So, hi and welcome everyone. I am Jo Fenn, the Project Director for AdGreen. Thanks for joining us today for this session as part of our annual review launch series. During this session, we're going to take you through the data and insights that are especially relevant for you guys as agency people, and then hear from our brilliant panel, who I'll introduce in a little bit. We probably won't get to any live questions, but the team will do their best to answer any questions in the chat. And you can always reach out to AdGreen for support afterwards as well, and we'll pop the email address in the chat now. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank our industry partners, Get Set Hire and Traveller, for their continued support, which enables us to put events like this together for the industry. So let's get started. First of all, we wanted to share some highlights of the AdGreen annual review, which we published just a few weeks ago. Before we go into specific data insights, I just want to talk about some carbon context so that you've got a point of reference as we go through. So emissions are measured in grams, kilograms, and metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e, E for equivalent. And the more you do an activity, the more emissions will be generated. Here's an extract from the review where we list some general activities and their carbon impact. And these are all from our favourite book, How Bad Are Bananas by Mike Berners-Lee. So one of the stats that we also give on that page is the average annual footprint for a person in the UK. Here you can see the average global footprint for a person, but it'd be great to know what you think the UK average is. If the global is 7, what do you think the UK average is? If you pop your guess in the chat, don't be shy. I was going to say there are no wrong answers, but technically there actually are. 10, 14, 15, 12, 12. Got some people who are very close. 3, okay. Okay, lots of good guesses and lots of guesses in general. That's great. So, Lauren, please reveal the actual answer, please. It is 13 tonnes. So 13 tonnes, that includes what an average person consumes in terms of material purchases and food, how and how much they travel, and how they power their home, and how much energy they use. So keep in mind that 13 tonnes as I run you through some of the stats from our 2022 data. So during 2022, various agencies and production companies completed 515 projects that resulted in either motion and or stills content. That's essentially entering information about the various activities that make up a shoot, like travel, power up the studio, catering, and so on, plus the post, and 17 audio projects, most of which simply included an audio post session for radio spots. So for the insights in the review, we just looked at the completed motion and stills projects, those 515. As you can see here, 2,446.1 metric tonnes of CO2 equivalent were emitted as a result of the 515 projects completed last year. 289 projects of the 515 were under a tonne in total, with a combined impact of 83.53 tonnes. Just 4 projects were over 100 tonnes, but those had a combined impact of 459.7 tonnes. So 4 projects, 459 tonnes, and at the other end of the scale, 289 projects that totaled 83 tonnes. And remember, if we compare that to the average footprint of a UK citizen in a year of 13 tonnes, so for those 4 projects over 100, that's the equivalent of the emissions generated by around 8 people in a year in the UK. And that was to create 30 or 60 seconds of motion content. So we're just talking about it in that context. So that's the overall size or overall impact of the projects completed last year and where they fall on the scale in terms of size. But what's the average size overall? So in our full data set, the average size of a completed project was 4.7 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. Although that ranged massively, with the smallest project being 1.5 kilos, a very small one-person project where they walked to the location and shot it themselves, and up to the other end of the scale of 129.6 tonnes at the largest end. So that doesn't mean that everything below that average of 4.7 tonnes is good and everything above is bad. It's just a data point for reference. You can also see from the median project impact of 708 kilos that the data is skewed low. So we know that there are many more projects akin to those in the 50 tonne and over bucket being produced across the industry, both in the UK and beyond, which are not yet being recorded. So one of our big goals for this year is trying to get more of those larger projects into the tool so we have a better representation. For those who can't remember from GCSE maths, the median is the middle value when all of the numbers are ordered by size. So all of those projects in order, and the middle one was 708 kilos. So that's across our whole data set. But what if we just look at the types of larger scale productions that many IPA members are working on? So when we looked at projects with shoot days and a budget of over £50,000 per shoot day, the average jumps up from 4.7 tonnes to 12.8. And the median from 708 kilos to 2.6 tonnes. So still skewed low. But if 50k per shoot day feels like the type of project that's normal for you, then the benchmark you'd want to reference is this 12.8 tonnes, which is the average amount per project. So who is responsible for these projects? When we talk about who creates them, it's the principal production partner, or PPP. It's usually a creative agency, although in some places it might be a production company working directly with the brand, but usually a creative agency who would then invite the production company to contribute their information to put that in and sort of have that responsibility as well. The PPP will also complete a project when all of the information has been finalised. So think of it like sort of actualising a budget and getting all those final figures in. So 87 companies were responsible for completing the 515 projects. And just 5 organisations completed 200 projects between them. So we had a few real super users. And on the other end of the scale, 39 companies completed just 1 project. We also looked at take-up amongst top agencies as per campaign. So 24% of projects were contributed to by a top UK creative agency, so one of the agencies in the top 100, as per the School Report 2022. And 20% of the top UK agencies contribute to a project, including 11 of the top 20. So it's clear from the previous few slides that engagement is needed from the agencies and production companies working on larger scale productions so that we'll get a more even picture. And we'd love to see these organisations embedding the recording of footprints into their production processes. So collaborating with production companies, supplying draft information about the planned shoot, and finalising activities with the production companies to complete the projects. We know this will take time, training, and refinement of the tool to make it easier and quicker, but we're working on that too. So, of course, as we get more large projects recorded in the tool, the average project size will rise, along with other related data points. But if that's a more realistic picture, then that's only a good thing. So let's talk activities next. We're always asked, what things are the worst? What should we not be doing? So across all projects, travel and transport accounted for 62.4% of carbon emissions. Energy and fuels was next up at almost a quarter, so 24.6%, then materials at 12.4%, and finally disposal at a mere 0.6%. That's what we were expecting in terms of the order of those activity areas. That lines up with what Albert know from their work in the film and TV industry. Here's the same breakdown, but for the 4 largest projects recorded in the tool, the ones that were over 100 tonnes that I mentioned earlier. But in both cases, and when we looked at projects with a budget of over £50,000 per shoot day, travel and transport is the highest. So that will always be the thing to focus on first when it comes to measuring and reducing. And you can see that for the 4 projects over 100 tonnes, 3 of which recorded air travel, it accounts for almost half of the overall emissions of the projects combined. So a massive chunk, 223 tonnes. So the project without air travel recorded their fuel for road travel by spend, which was around £30,000. This included crew, cast, art department, costume department, equipment, facilities, and their scouts and tech scouts. So a lot of detail in that particular footprint, but also a high spend. So we know that air travel can have a really big impact, but we don't want to overshadow the fact that petrol and diesel fueled vehicles can also have a huge impact as well. So this example shows the impact per passenger per kilometre travelled is actually higher for one person travelling alone in their car than that one person flying for this particular journey from London to Edinburgh. So just to sort of prove it's not always the case. So if you're bringing together a cast and crew from different places, delivering costumes and props or scouting various locations by road, as well as having clients and colleagues from your agency attend, this can add up as well. So can you look at alternative options such as car sharing or reducing the number of people travelling from the agency and brand, for example? So this is where the tool can really help you. We really like to highlight the 3 stages of using the carbon calculator. First up, you can use it to check the impact of one activity against another. For example, a flight versus a train or a car. Next up, and this will be done in collaboration with the production company, is to draft your part of the footprint using information from your budget. For example, the travel, costs such as travel and accommodation if you're sort of transporting them in, and post-production, and also any kind of catering and accommodation for your team and clients. And from then, you would finalise the details of your own, and the production company would do theirs to complete the footprint and then finalise that project. So only completed projects go into our data set, so only ones that are marked as complete with a green tag on them. In the annual review, we included a few suggestions that agencies can take. So we always group them into these sections. As we know from the previous few slides, travel and transport should be considered first, as it usually has the highest impact. Then spaces, then materials, and finally disposal. So you can see for travel, developing scripts which can be shot locally or using CG or VFX will have a large impact instead of doing those flights. Taking public transport or using remote monitoring. And for spaces, powering your office with renewable energy, selecting production partners who are doing the same, for example, as well as potentially your post spaces as well. For materials, again, we're working heavy or sort of material heavy script items such as wet downs, planning food shoots to minimize waste, and selecting vegetarian or vegan evening meals if staying overnight. And finally, ensuring there's a reuse and rehoming plan for any items that are used. For more tips like this, you can now just download a bespoke version of our resources guide, which has been created specifically for those agencies and includes suggestions that are sort of relevant to the agency's role. It will also include a number of things you can request of the production company to open up that conversation as well. So do take a download of that. We'll be posting some links towards the end. Now, before we introduce our panel, I want to talk about a couple of final things. So last year we saw 46% of trainees were from agencies, which is amazing to see this sort of really high level engagement. Actually, it's 53.5%, not 46 at all, even better. And then we had also a large amount from, this is sort of within agencies, a large amount from production, as you'd expect, but also a really big amount from creative, which is brilliant. This was up from the previous year. So creative is obviously a massive place to engage on this topic because what you write in the script has to be translated into how it's going to actually be done in practice. So it's really great to see that engagement. The other roles, obviously great to see as well, account handling and the sort of higher up roles, the sort of management C-suite as well, to sort of understand what we're doing and that whole sort of piece. That's great. So the average production manager can only reduce between 15 and 20% of emissions from production. Because by the time they come to it, high carbon items may already be baked into the script. So, for example, if a shoot calls for a sunny beach in December, it's likely that flights will be involved. If a scene requires 100 cast members, your costume and catering may increase significantly. And if the vision includes a large set, for example, that could result in a large amount of waste. So we're not saying these shoots should never happen again, but at script stage, it's worth considering, in collaboration with the creative team, whether this is necessary, whether there's alternative ways to achieve those different things, and if the scale of the production aligns with the values of both your agency and also with the brand who's commissioning the piece of work. So our main training module gives you a good deep dive into the context and the tool, and from there are more bite-sized modules coming soon, including how to use your budget to create a very quick draft footprint. I know some people are concerned about potentially the time it might take, but we're going to show you how to do it really, really speedily. If you haven't yet joined our training, we would love to have you and recommend it to everyone, regardless of your role. We also have very short 2-minute how-to videos for the carbon calculators as well. So things like logging in, how to add people to projects, and entering activities. So give those a watch if you're new and not sure where to start. And again, some more links coming up as well. And finally, before we open up the panel, we wanted to spotlight the agencies who are leading the way in carbon measurement. So I wanted to take this minute just to say thank you to the top 12. We obviously have some of them in our panel today, and to everyone else who contributed to our data set last year. If you haven't yet downloaded our annual review, there is there's a lot more information beyond what we've shared today. So please do download it after this event. This is just literally a snapshot, and you'll find a link for that in the comments as well coming up. So without further ado, let's meet our panel. If we can remove the slides, please, and everyone can turn their videos on so we can see your lovely faces. Hello, everybody. So we've brought together those who are sort of helping push sustainability in production within their respective organisations. So firstly, I'd like to welcome Elliot Liss, Head of Production at the IPA. We are also joined by Louise Bonner, Head of Film at Havas London, and Adam Javes, Lead Producer at Havas Studios, which is the production company for Havas Agency Network and beyond. Plus, we have Fiona Rees-White, Group Head of Integrated Production at Oliver, and finally, Sam Robinson, Executive Production Director at Saatchi & Saatchi London. Everyone can say a quick hello, that'd be lovely.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Okay, so I've got some questions for each of you. I'm going to kick off with Elliot. Kind of as the sort of, the trade body for the ad agencies, it'd be great to get your take sort of to start us off. So why do you think it's important for the IPA as a trade body to kind of support the sustainability efforts of your member agencies and also the wider industry?
Yeah, well, it's the right thing to do, and it's the responsible thing to do for us as an industry and as individuals. And I think that there's a huge amount of goodwill now towards sustainable behaviours across many member agencies and the individuals who work there. So but that's best channeled through kind of cross-industry initiatives such as AdGreen and AdNet Zero, and through the brilliant work that you guys are doing. That's how we'll make the efforts of individuals, of brands, and of agencies that much more effective and start to have real impact.
Totally, and you guys have been really supportive sort of through the PPG group, and obviously I know some of the members have been really helpful in sort of talking to us about tool feedback and things. So it's been great to have that support from you guys as well. Fiona, I'll come to you next. We know that Oliver is part of the Change the Brief Alliance. If you could maybe explain a little bit about what that involves, and also how that sort of feeds into your production process, both at sort of scripting and shoot stages, that'd be great.
Sure, brilliant. Thanks, Joe. So ultimately, Oliver has a really strong commitment to impacting change when it comes to sustainability. So it's something that it's been really exciting to be part of, and obviously all the tools that AdGreen's given us has really made that a lot easier to take on board. So we've had lots of commitment from our team, which has been amazing, but I do feel quite strongly that with production people being engaged, it's not the only people in the conversation, and we have to widen the remit of the conversation a little bit within the business. So when we committed to AdGreen, we realized very, very quickly that it couldn't just be production people that were leading the charge with the sustainability conversation. So the business also signed up to Change the Brief, which was more so about actively engaging the leaders across our business in terms of creative and strategy and client service departments as well, which really helped to widen the impact that conversation was having. So the commitment for Change the Brief runs alongside our AdGreen commitments, of course, but that's much more about building confidence around sustainability, the conversation about sustainability. But also, it really thinks about the sustainability lens that we apply to that strategy and creative phases, which comes a bit earlier. And of course, it just helps support our production teams to make those more sustainable choices. But it goes kind of beyond that. I think it also helps to normalize the sustainable behaviors in the backdrop of the content that we're creating as well. So that really increases the impact the sustainability conversation can have for us as an agency. So it's been really nice.
Great. It sort of sets the sort of backdrop that everyone can then refer to. Yeah, because as
absolutely.
you say, it's not just the production piece; it comes so much earlier than that. Otherwise, you can only do what you can do.
Yeah, exactly. So there's obviously, as you referenced, we can change the location, we can reduce the travel, etc. But also, it's really nice to think about for our creatives to think about how they normalize sustainable behaviors for the target audience that we're actually trying to create the content for. So by embedding sustainable behaviors within the content, it's almost like a subliminal approach, but it also has a lot of impact too.
Yeah, kind of a double layer.
Exactly. Yeah,
I like it. Now, Havas, one of our top users this year. Big congrats. Well, you guys all are. We know that sort of Havas Group as a whole is committed to becoming an environmental leader, and sort of is looking to engage in best practice. Obviously, you come from slightly different parts of the business, but it'd be great to have you. Obviously, we've got both of you sort of representing that. it would be great to kind of hear perhaps from you, Adam, how the studio has worked with brands and agencies and sort of the in-house agencies, at Havas, to kind of ensure everyone understands what the sort of potential carbon impact of production is, and then sort of what can be done as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at the risk of oversimplifying it, for us, it's very much about communication. I think we realised very quickly that you can't implement this kind of widespread change unless everyone is on board, particularly in a network as kind of big and far-reaching as Havas. So we try and put sustainability as part of the conversation from the outset. And I think we're in a unique and probably quite lucky position to be able to do that, because we're all in the same building. And so these kinds of conversations and collaboration can happen really quickly. And as you and Fiona have already touched on, I think this is particularly helpful and important when it comes to the creatives, because that's where the idea is coming from, and it's where a campaign kind of starts its life. And what we really try and do is get ahead of a script before particular decisions have been cemented. And I think it's very important to caveat that we're never trying to stifle creativity in that respect, but we can at least put sustainability on the agenda and workshop ways that a script can be executed with the environment in mind. And collaborating with Lou's team and the agency producers is also a great way of doing that. And one thing that we found really helpful is working together with the agency producers even before an idea is presented to the client, and drafting a prospective footprint using the calculator. So, getting those metrics as early as possible, because that can show us the potentially carbon heavy areas of a script, and we can then work out together what a more sustainable execution of the idea might look like. And we've touched on some of those things, whether it's reducing cast or leaning into domestic locations, but we can just pinpoint it. So yeah, it's very much about communication at every step of the process for us. And I think that's why our commitment as Havas Studios to sustainable productions is clearly articulated throughout. As soon as you get a bid letter from us, our sustainability charter is on there. So if you want to engage us as a production partner, at least you know what you're getting yourselves in for and what our intentions are. And then all the way through to the PPM, we want to have dedicated slides that are educating a client, what sustainability looks like for that particular shoot. So we just want to shove it down everyone's throats as much as possible, really.
And that's why you're a champion and why you're on this call. No, that's brilliant though. I think, it is building it in so early. And I think if you can show someone why you're suggesting a certain thing, it's so much more powerful than just like, we think it should be done this way. If you got some stats to back it up, which obviously you can get from the tool, that's great. And it's also kind of, although generally travel and transport's biggest, it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all approach. It might be a smaller production that is more local, but there are still things that can be done. We actually, maybe we always do vegan food or whatever it might be that can sort of is an easy win to just help sort of tick that off the list. And I think, the communication aspect's great, sort of having that bid letter or bid specs where it's, kind of laid out, like, if you work with us, this is how we like to do things. You can then, you're sort of putting it back to the, the agency to sort of say, oh, actually, we don't like that. You know what I mean? It sort of helps create that sort of, oh, right, by default, we're good, And Louise,
yeah,
sort of, what does that look like? Oh, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like Fiona said, it's a two-way street. I think it's not just on production. Everyone needs to be part of the conversation. And
totally.
So that's really what we're trying to mandate.
Yeah, totally. And so often as well, the bigger pieces can be something that the agency might have affected as well, whether it's through the script or whether it's, because of certain people traveling. And Louise, sort of, what does that look like from your side, sort of on the other side of working, on the agency side?
Well, yeah, I mean, through our commitments as a B Corp, we're already ahead of the game, and the specific Havas London sustainability policies have been in motion for well over a year now. So we've embraced the calculator from almost the beginning, and we've got all data now since January 22, because we're using it for all productions, including animation, adapts and radio. So we've converted our ambitions and goals into tangible steps for our producers. And as Adam said, we do share a lot of the same policies and a lot of the policy in action as well. So everything that Adam has said, we do as well in Havas London. Training, charters for partners, areas to be mindful of. But it's not just the company policy, it's actually group policy. And what we've been doing in production is leading the way within our entities and other departments. There is a massive drive within Havas Group to make a change and for
this to become part of our DNA. We have a large committee of business leaders headed up by a newly appointed CSO. And they meet monthly to share tools and methods and training and guidance to establish consistent standards and best practice. So everyone is accountable, and at Havas, opting out is not an option.
I love that. I think having that sort of like network of people who, you can call upon for support, some thoughts, or, we've tried this, did it work? I think that's so important. And I think I've heard about sort of cross-agency or cross-agency groups, as it were, sort of having that conversation as well. We've tried this, did it work? So Sam, coming to you as one of our other super users, we've got the nitty-gritty questions for you. Okay. How does it all kind of work in practice? Obviously, we've seen a really great number of Saatchi and Saatchi projects through, but it'd be good to know sort of how it works in practice.
Well, we started again. We were an early adopter as well of the AdGreen calculator, and we started off quite small to start with. I mean, we kind of only started on AV projects initially. We start off kind of at script level, like everybody else. We present in pre-bids and everything else. We present a whip of that carbon calculator so that we can have those meaningful conversations early on. And we find that quite useful. And we do have conversations. Our clients have definitely come to the table. All of them around the sustainability. All of them have signed up to it. All of our clients have said yes. And so we very much kind of it's on the forefront of everything really. And it's been a great useful tool. We run through it. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But we run through it from the beginning of the pre-bid. And we also look at, can we shoot things in different places all the time? It's not always necessary to shoot in one place. And we look at all of that and we assess everything. And then, obviously at that point, then we have to start engaging with our production partners as well. But it's at the very forefront of kind of Saatchi's agenda.
That's great. And I think we've really seen that come through, like we have for all of you guys, in sort of the number of projects that aren't just created, but actually completed. So it's great that, everyone's sort of on board and like, we're not just going to kind of lose momentum halfway through or kind of, waste that work we've put in. We're actually going to get them completed and get them into our, because obviously they go into our data set, but they also go into yours. That's your own data set to kind of look at and analyze compared to that, that 4.7 tons on average, or the 12.8 if you're doing those larger projects. So that gives you that sense as well. That is great, and hopefully inspiring for those on the call. Yeah, Elliot, go for it.
Could I just add, what everybody has just described is not only very sort of commendable for their business, but I think it's really important for future-proofing what we do as an industry. I think it's inevitable that kind of carbon responsibility, so legal requirements to audit are going to come down the track, and I think as a business, it would be a good idea to be ready for that. And I also think that it's if as an industry we appear to be capable of self-regulating well in this area, then whatever the legal requirements will hopefully be less onerous. So I just think it's very wise practice for us to anticipate this.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. It's kind of get on board now, and you kind of get that run-up time to kind of get used to it, get it embedded, figure out what you might need to tweak to make it happen, or
And we're a service industry, and the people in this room are the sort of trusted production experts for their clients. And I think that if the client brand wants this sort of behavior, then the agency should be expert in delivering it, not only knowledgeable and able to measure, but then able to apply that in terms of how the production is carried out. And I think that's just going to increasingly be an essential part of client service. And I think if you're seeing particularly if you're seeing the AdGreen levy as a line on your budget, then you should be treating it like a deliverable. And I think that as producers, we should be very good at offering constructive solutions to creatives and clients. And you wouldn't let a project run over budget or deliver late because there were creative demands. You'd find a constructive you find a constructive solution, a positive solution to get what you needed done. And so I just think that sort of excessive or unnecessary carbon emissions from production is wasting time and wasting money. Good producers don't put up with it.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think as well, we are seeing from our point of view, brands contact us about kind of what to do with that data, especially since the annual review came out. It's great to see what the average is. How do we figure out where we sit in this? And we're talking to them about how they can download their data, which of their agencies are engaged. They'll sort of want to know who's kind of involved, and obviously we can only tell them so much based on what the sort of T&Cs of the tool are. But it's really interesting to see what they're asking us about and what kind of could be coming down the track. So I think and at the moment, I think, as you said, Elliot, there's not a kind of legal obligation, but that will only get tighter as we kind of move forward into the future. And I think if if you can start to think about those services that you could offer on the back of the data that you have, looking at policy, for example, we already do this because we saw from our data that X, Y, and Z was happening, for example, last year compared to this year. There's kind of lots of different ways to take that. Elliot, let's talk challenges. What do you think the biggest hurdle is for agencies who are sort of looking to engage in sustainable practices, whether perceived or actual? Any hurdles welcome here in this conversation?
Yeah, sorry, just deal with the hurdle of coming off mute. Yes, I mean, look, people are incredibly busy. I think we've probably been saying this as long as I've been in the industry, but I just genuinely think timings are getting pushed. The scope of deliverables is only increasing, and and budgets are getting squeezed. So I think that it's sort of understandable that if people have a perception that it's going to be very time consuming, or if there's a fear that in the short term more sustainable production methods are going to be more expensive, then there will be a hesitancy, or worse still, people will put their heads in the sand. But I think it's not about it's not about sort of naming and shaming. It's about using the measurement as a springboard to do different in the future. I hope that if people engage with the training, and if people give it a whirl, that they will start to find that it's not an insurmountable obstacle, and as the sort of leading examples, several of whom are on this call can attest, it only gets quicker and smoother as a process. That's not to downplay that effort is required, and resources of time and potentially with your suppliers, money are required. It is important. So people should just be keeping it near the top of their priority list.
Totally. And I think we heard last week on the sort of production company version of this how the production companies were approaching it, and it was a very similar thing. And obviously there's a call for us to make in the way the tool is has been made, to sort of balance out it being as simple as possible while being as robust as possible. And those two things are kind of opposite ends of the scale. So trying to make them kind of meet somewhere in the middle, so that the data you get is enough to make decisions. And not every job would come out the same if it was kind of too aggregated, but kind of easy enough to put in from a kind of user point of view. So there is a balance to be struck, and obviously it's always going to take some time. We're kind of trying to do what we can on our end to try and minimize that as much as possible with the new training that we're putting out, sort of how to use your budget. So hopefully, as you say, it won't be kind of too onerous, but we totally get this is a new process. This is a new thing that it's a new muscle to be trained. People haven't done this before. And
I think the sunny uplands for us as an industry are, once we've got a brilliant data set, then we will be able to see what the issues are with much more certainty. Right now, there's a lot of fantastic work going on, but we do have a little bit of a gap, truth be told, in terms of how typical the projects are that are going into the calculator, and it doesn't look like we're capturing enough of the larger projects to really be getting a full and true picture of what's happening. But once we do, then people can start to shift the behaviours. We can start to shift the behaviour change upstream, and suppliers and methodologies will inevitably follow the demands of the industry. So it will get easier, smoother, second nature, and hopefully the sort of efficacy of what we're trying to do will snowball. But we do have to put the hard yards in the hard yards in now. But I don't think those yards are as hard as perhaps some people fear them to be.
Yeah. Yeah, always difficult. That's great. That's really good. And I think we are in kind of this, I don't want to sort of underplay it, but we're in sort of or overplay it perhaps. We're in kind of a bit of a grace period at the moment where there is time to kind of get to grips with it while not everyone is asking for it. So there's kind of a chance to kind of figure it out, have a bit of a think about kind of what your shoots look like for you. That's different for every company that uses the tool at the moment. But how can we approach this knowing what we know, at this point in time before it's kind of mandated for us, if it ever would be. Obviously we don't necessarily know what's coming down the track, but there is kind of that period at the moment where you can kind of use the time to get to grips with it. Obviously, what time is available? We know it's busy. Now, for each of you, so obviously, as I kind of just hinted there, the data that we now collect means that we can kind of obviously track where we're at now and going forward. So everyone has the opportunity to do that, provided they're obviously using the tool and putting some projects through it. How do you guys see the data sort of from the annual review and from your own sort of data sets informing sort of how you might do production in the future? And perhaps Sam, I'll come to you first, if that's not too scary.
Also navigating my microphone button. It's an interesting one, actually. I think we've been sort of rolling it out on all of our AV projects. We've also now been rolling it out on our print and our radio projects. And it's really interesting now, after this year, seeing kind of where we're netting out and the approaches that we've been making and the changes that we need to continue to make. We have signed up to being AdNet Zero. We're making all these mindful changes. And it has to come from us, I think. It's like us educating our clients as well. And it's really interesting now seeing that data. We've got some very big clients with some very big outputs. And it's been interesting seeing quite how the impact we've had just by making, like you say, a 60-second spot for one of our major clients, flying to South Africa, all the VFX, the shoots and everything else, and seeing the impact that had and the time of year we had to shoot. And it's now, we've now got to start thinking about how we make those changes. And those changes are happening now at creative development stage, like what Lou was saying as well. We are in the same, arena, and what Fiona was also saying. So it's now kind of really trying to, start making those decisions and involving everyone. And I'm loving the fact that there are more creatives that are signing up for this as well. I'm hoping that's the case with our creatives as well. I have to try and find out now whether that is actually the case, and encouraging them now to also do that training, because there's so much knowledge there on your website. It's really, really useful tools there, I've found, actually. Just start off by doing your online training courses. They're really helpful. And then there's a whole load of information. And I think that's where we started. And, we're going to continue to roll this out now across all of our productions, not just the AV side of things. It's going across everything, whether it's a banner ad, a radio spot, even if it's a sonic branding project. It's the levies there across all those projects. And so now it's about making sure that the reports are done and then again presented to our clients at the back end. That's really, really important that we do that. And we're coming up with the next thing. That's the program for 2023 for us, is trying to make sure we're it's going through all of our productions across everything.
That's great. And I think that's a really nice point as well, sort of having started with kind of a ring fence selection of projects that fit a certain criteria. So you're not kind of like, oh my God, we need to go from doing nothing to everything. How are we going to do that? Like
exactly.
Starting with some kind of defined portion of projects, whether that's a certain
whether
size,
it's a client
type,
or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
start small and then you start to spread as you become more experienced yourself. And actually, you think the tool's it seems quite scary to start with. I certainly found that when I started doing it, but actually it's not. You get quite fast at it. And it's also a case of really encouraging your production partners to get involved from the get-go. Something that we were doing is, when we go into pitch stage to production companies, we tell them that this is an expectation from us. we expect them, if they feel they might even need to charge for a PM or a PA an extra few days to data input all this information, we absolutely support that, and so do our clients. I think that's really important. So don't be afraid to ask for those things. I think it's unfair to expect a production company to do that for free necessarily. So we make sure that those things are kind of set up from the project at the very beginning. And you can start small. You don't have to start huge. You don't have to start with your biggest production. And it's actually it's just like learning how to use it. It's actually quite it's all right. It's not difficult. Don't be scared. I'd say.
You can come again, Sam. So Louise, perhaps same question to you, kind of how you think in the future you might use the sort of data that you guys are sort of building, that data that you're building, obviously with, you know, companies like Adam's support as well, to kind of inform how you might go forward. And also it'd be lovely to hear about the sort of brand engagement side. Obviously Sam touched on it there, but sort of how you're engaging or kind of working with those brands to help them understand what the data means as well.
Well, you saw me nodding along to everything Sam was saying, because she's basically word for word
covered it.
We covered it exactly, like everything you said, Sam. It's, you know, we that you know, that's what we're embracing as well. But what I would say to further that I think it's gonna, the use of the calculator is going to help it become a mindset, you know, and an instinct for the producers. So, you know, when they see, at the moment, we can see a script and we kind of go, we know roughly how long that will take and how much it will cost. Like in terms of sustainability, they should be able to look at that and know what the emissions will be. So, you know, there'll be, you know, a time when they're saying, well, that's a lot of timber, or suddenly they see that, you know, there's a wet down, and they'll know instinctively what those emissions will be and be able to, you know, to advise on that. You know, we're already having conversations early on, as Sam said, around travel and, you know, where to shoot, alternative numbers, number of attendees and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I think using that it's going to be change our mindset and become instinct. And in terms of, you know, working with our brands, it's about awareness. And, you know, Adam touched on that, communication, not just within the group, but with our clients as well. So, you know, again, as Sam said, Levy is on everything. We've communicated that to them. We get we never get pushback. I mean, I'd be really surprised if anyone ever refused to pay that. And, you know, some clients are looking for that data, and we have it. So, yeah, that's it's been really useful.
That's great. And Fiona, perhaps for the sort of final agency perspective, what you guys sort of thinking at Oliver in terms of how to use that information that you're gathering?
Yeah, totally agree. Everybody's made such valid points, but I suppose the only thing I can add in is that I think the data, we live in quite a subjective world, don't we, as production people? Like, are we having impact? What does, you know, unless you get the right measures on the data of the content that you produce, then you are always kind of sometimes guessing, like, did it have the impact that we hoped it would ultimately have? What's brilliant about the data, and we've used it already, I think it's fantastic. Like, it's so simple, it's so black and white, and it really empowers that conversation that you're having. And the more you put into it, the more you get out, which is great, because at the beginning, just as the rest of these guys have already said, you know, you do get a little bit of fear. All my producers were like, oh my God, this is going to add so much to time, and they're already so time poor. And I totally understand that conversation. But the minute they understood the power of it, that was like, it just changed everything, right? Because they can have those active conversations with clients and creatives and production partners, and it really does become a very black and white conversation. And, you know, totally agree with what Lee said. Like, clients are actually now wanting to, like, they're asking us for more than even this. You know, they want to be more engaged with that sustainability conversation. This really helps us to have a really active and confident sustabiety conversation around production, which I think is fantastic. So I can only thank you guys for that.
Point, actually. Yeah. Oh, thank you guys for using it. But I think, you know, the sort of the confidence level that gives you, like, we cannot just say, we think this is going to be quite, you know, small shoot, low impact, or, you know, on the flip side, like, you know, this is quite a high impact script, but this is the hero, this is the big one for the year, for example, you know, whatever the justification of doing a certain thing a certain way is. But now you can sort of say for sure, you know, the impact of this is going to be this. We could do it this way, which would be this, you know, so you can sort of, that sustainable swap idea, you know, sort of comparing one activity against another, or one type of thing against another thing. is
Definitely.
so valuable, because it just gives you, like you say, that confidence to be like, we can say that for sure. It's not.
And I also think like we are the closest partners for these brands, right? But it actually helps build that collaboration in production too. It's not just about like, okay, we're going to present to you much further down the line. It becomes more, helps us to engage the conversation or production a bit earlier even as well, because we want to table these conversations. So you then start to build that collaboration with your brand teams, etc. as well, which is better.
Totally. And perhaps Adam, I'll finish off with you on this one. It was touched on before, the sort of carbon literacy aspect of like looking at a script and knowing roughly if that's going to be low or high. Do you feel like, having used the tool quite a bit, you're sort of building that sort of bank of knowledge now where you can sort of say, oh, this one's going to be probably quite high, or this one's going to be this? Do you feel like that's coming? And it's fine to say the answer is no. That may take longer.
Yeah, no, I think it is coming, and Lou touched on it as well. We kind of want it to become second nature, but at least in the beginning, what the data does is it demonstrates the easy wins and gives us as production company producers something real to react to. Because I think when you're trying to push this kind of change, environmental change or any change, it's about accountability, and that only feels tangible when you have a reference point. And up until the calculator and the metrics that it's giving us, I don't think we necessarily had kind of a centralized reference point. It's a bit of an AdGreen mantra, but you really can't manage what you can't measure. And so there's no burying your head in the sand when you can clearly see what the most efficient ways to remove carbon from productions are. And I've had a similar conversation with a lot of industry peers where they've said, we've had situations on quite big shoots where moving from meat-based catering to plant-based catering actually saved more carbon than the flights did, which is a stark and a very illuminating piece of information. And the calculator and the data we're getting gives us that kind of information. And so as we build it up more and more, we can make more informed decisions, and hopefully it'll become second nature.
Nice, I love that. And I think this probably is a nice time to also shout out the new feature we released in the tool, I think last week, where you can now look at your activities as one giant list. So not only sort of looking at them, for those who are familiar with the tool, sort of by activity area, but actually looking at a kind of show all version. So you can see actually really quickly what your most impactful item is, and then kind of almost work down from there in terms of, you may not be able to tackle that one because it's already fixed for whatever reason, but next up is this thing, or we can do something about that one. And it also kind of shows you, in a way, what not to worry about, because it's right at the bottom of that list. And, for a lot of people, that's going to be disposal. So, it might be that that's something that's kind of, obviously falls to the production usually to kind of organize, but it might be that that's less relevant when there's this really big piece up top that could be tackled relatively easily, or with a couple of tweaks, or perhaps with a policy change for the future. So hopefully that will also kind of make that process sort of even easier. So not just the measurement, but then the sort of reduction piece as well. So 10 minutes to go. I'm going to kind of start wrapping us up. You guys, I think, have been really inspiring. I'm really hoping that everyone who's sort of listening is sort of thinking, okay, fine, we're going to get on board now, we're going to get involved. If you had one piece of advice, obviously don't try and say the same thing, one different piece of advice from everyone else, what would it be to everyone listening to kind of get started? And we'll pop some links in the chat as well for sort of, how to register for the tool if you're not yet, and all that sort of stuff. But one top tip. So Elliot, I'll come back to you to start and kick us off.
Okay.
Oh, you're back on mute, Elliot. Those pesky hurdles.
Hello. Sorry about that. This might not be exactly what you want me to say, Joe, but I would say my top tip would be that obviously the AdGreen team cannot handhold everybody through every project, but if you've given it an honest go and hit a bit of a stumbling block, then I'm sure that they would rather you picked up the phone and asked for a bit of help than you just kind of walked away from carbon measurement, never to return. So I would say use the brilliant people at AdGreen would be my top tip, but sparingly.
Appreciate that. No, I think that's a really nice point to make. Like, we are here, and generally speaking, when we get a panicked email from someone and they do come through, we can usually help you so easily and so quickly. So if you are really struggling and stuck, just tell us and we'll literally come and help you. Perhaps Sam, I'll come to you next.
Well, bar doing your wonderful training courses, I think, which are really, really super helpful. Start small. I think that's what I said before. Just start with one project or one client if that's the easiest thing to do, and just have a play with it. It's a great system. It's a really great way of learning your output and your carbon footprint and what could be possible. It doesn't have to be done at the end. Don't save it all till the end. Start small. Start with one
early.
project. Start early.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Fiona?
Can get off mute there, sorry. I think that, once you get your head around the tools and kind of you start to really engage with the wonderful people at AdGreen who will obviously help you with what you need. I think just try and make it part of the everyday conversation in your agency. I think normalize the conversation around sustainability. That's really helped us. I think everybody has personal kind of sustainability goals, I think, and translating that into a professional space and environment, I think that's been our real driver. The minute we've empowered the producers with, and the rest of our teams as well, that's our goal for 2023, is to kind of spread the training far and wide from the AdGreen tools. But ultimately, the minute they realize the power it could have, then you're kind of translating your personal goals into professional ones as well, which is a really nice kind of driver, I think, to kind of impact change. So yeah, and start small. I totally agree with that. That was a very, very scary start. So Sam's very right on that.
Love that. Okay, Lou?
Just to slightly elaborate on what both Elliot and Sam said, just get going and don't hold yourself back on getting the details accurate. Something is better than nothing. Otherwise, you'll just procrastinate. It is quite scary when you look at it at the beginning, but and you, Joe, you might not want me to say this,
but be honest.
But something that I say to our producers is just put something in, just kind of slightly guess. Don't waste your time trying to find out who ate what on the shoot. Just maybe if it's 8 people on a shoot, just do a bit of a benchmarking exercise, because otherwise they will procrastinate and not do anything, and then it just sits there for months and months. Just do it. That's my top tip.
Love that. I think it's sort of almost think about it like when you're putting together a budget, for me as a production manager, putting together a budget, it's like some things you can get a real cost on, some things from previous jobs, some things or you're putting in a rough number. But ultimately, if you kind of like Sam said, if you start at the beginning, you can put something in as a placeholder, you can put something rough, you can group things together, don't let perfection get in the way of progress, I think is the one at this stage, because everyone is learning and getting started. And, we see that in the projects that are coming through. We can see that people have made some estimates, and if that's the best you have at that time, then that's better than nothing, isn't it? Thanks, Lou. And then perhaps Adam, I'll pitch it slightly differently to you. Given your sort of production company side, what's the one thing agencies could do to kind of maybe make your life easier or demonstrate their commitment? Because I think we've got a lot of production companies that are really wanting to get going on this, and they're sort of starting projects themselves and not necessarily getting that agency engagement. So what could they do perhaps from that point of view?
I think perhaps having someone or a group of people who are dedicated to sustainability. That's not to say that they have to do the day-to-day input of data, but someone who is leading the charge. So as a production entity, who you're going to, and there's a dedicated person that you can ask questions of and interact with. Because I think it goes back to the kind of communication point. You can have the best intentions, but they'll only be worth anything if everyone is on the same page. And I think, we're all very busy and we all come from quite big groups. So to have that kind of point of contact from production to agency and know who's talking to each other would be really helpful. And we're starting to see that as well, with the likes of sustainability ambassadors and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think a spearhead for sustainability within groups is really helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you're stuck as well, we have a good idea of who some of those champions are. So if you're really stuck perhaps at your own agency, sort of not sure who's holding that baton, who's leading the charge, do get in touch. We might be able to put you in the right direction as well. Those are all brilliant tips. Thank you. And hopefully everyone sort of listening is now fired up and ready to go. I've seen the link for the registering for the tool and logging in is on the chat. So no excuses from anyone. So thank you all so much for joining us and being on that panel, and also being our super users. It's brilliant to kind of have you really just talk about what that means and kind of really celebrate that with you for a minute. And obviously we'll see what happens in next year's annual review. So we also want to remind anyone on the call who's listening who's already got some data in that tool that you can download that now yourself. We actually have an additional report as of last week, so you can get the basic version, which is the one that's always been there, or you can get a detailed version, which actually gives you every single activity for every project, so you can do some more in detail analysis sort of around specific activities, not just activity areas. So for the data nerds out there, even more info can be had and analysed on a lunch break. So there's a 1-minute video on how to do that in case you're unsure. And our next event will be in May. That's our annual review for brands. So if you'd like to sort of share that with anyone, please do. We'll post some details in the chat, and that's also on our website as well. I think we might be tweaking the date of that one, so we'll share that when we've got that finalised as well, based on the participants we're going to have. This will be available to watch online for anyone who's maybe missed the beginning or have colleagues that couldn't make it, so do share that with them. And thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you on another event really, really soon.